Jamie, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike. We're going to see you in super HD next week.
Yeah, it's going to be fabulous, yeah. You may not like it. I mean, you might think if my face is a bit big for the TV screen, but we'll see. You can always put it back down to black and white and just make it... In fact, maybe I'll actually get them to transmit it in black and white, because I tasted when things were better, you know. Who can say? Let's talk about 20 miles an hour for a minute, because Rishi Sunak on the front of the Telegraph today is saying he wants to block these new 20-mile-an-hour zones. Presumably that's too late for you guys in Wales, because Kim Jong-Drakeford has already kind of imposed it all over the country, hasn't he?
Yeah, well, we've got the 20-mile-an-hour zones pretty much everywhere now, unless it's in the residential areas, Mike, where you've kind of got street lights, some exemptions from some councils, but it's caused kind of uproar in the UK, in Wales now, and looking across how it might happen across the UK, Mike. We've had this petition going on, and it's the biggest petition ever that's hit the Senate. 447,000 people have... Yeah, 422,000 of them in Wales. I think one of the ministers was saying, well, I'm sure people have been Googling Welsh postcodes to fill it in. But the number of people in Wales who've actually filled in the petition, Mike, isn't far off the number of people who voted for the Labour Party to be in government. So
wow.
We have
what is that, about a quarter of the population or something?
Well, the populations, we only had about 46% of the population generally vote anyway, Mike, and only a fraction of them vote for the Labour Party themselves. But yeah, 20-mile-an-hour zones aren't going down very well here. They're still going on the line that, well, it will save lives, sceptical as to how much that will save, Mike. But it's one of the interesting stories of this 20-mile-an-hour is the bus drivers. Some of the bus journeys across Wales now, Mike, the bus drivers are stopping. They're not going to the end of the line because they haven't got enough time, because they're already behind. So they're having to stop and turn around. So basically bus journeys are in carnage in Wales at the moment.
So what, the bus companies haven't managed to rearrange the timetables to take care of the fact that they're going to travel at half the speed they used to travel at?
Well, yeah, and what are they going to do, Mike, as well, if they do adjust all the timetables? They're going to have to then put in either more buses to get the frequency of the services in, which will cost more money, which is going to cost more to the economy. You know, this hasn't been well thought through. Labour Party is saying, well, it's in our manifesto. It was one line in the manifesto, Mike. It hasn't been well thought through. And I do think Sunak knows that some of the public are getting angry in this. Some people are supportive of this, but remember, some people don't drive, so this is a good policy.
But the thing is, the argument they keep using, and the argument you always hear from the sort of cycling nutters, is, oh, yeah, but it's saving lives. You know, people aren't being killed in quite as many numbers because we've reduced the speed limit. Well, you can make that argument, of course you can, but you might as well say, get rid of cars altogether and nobody will be run over. But, I mean, you know, there is a balance to be struck here, isn't there?
Yeah, totally. I enjoy doing some cycling. I go on the road cycling, and I drive my car on the road as well. But you are, if the Welsh government and the UK government or any government wants to make things safer, then build more kind of bypasses away from pedestrians, build more pedestrian walkways that aren't near roads. You know, just killing the car for this ideology here isn't the way to go, Mike. And I think Sunak's realised that this is an area like in ULEZ in London that is dividing the population, and if he's going to put some kind of gap between him and the Labour Party for the next election, this is one area that he can see to Wales that there's been this backlash, and it's an area that he might garner some votes for. Yeah,
exactly right. Let's talk about the tax business, because it looks as though this study that's come out today by the Fiscal Studies Institute says that the tax take in 24-25 is going to be huge. It's going to be like nearly £1,000 billion, which I think is £1 trillion. I'm not entirely sure how you work that one out. But, of course, we could have told you so, right? Because the tax take is necessary to now pay for all the stuff that they told us was free during the time of COVID, like the free COVID tests, not free, like these sort of furlough payments, not free. All the things that we said were going to cost us money in the long term are now apparently coming back to bite us on the backside.
Oh, totally, Mike. We've discussed this many times over the last few years. So, yeah, 70 billion was spent on furlough. You've got the track and trace, then you've got all the PP, which, you know, some of the contracts there kind of very questionable in terms of how they were given up. Now, the official estimates do have a range of about 310 to 412 billion pounds was spent by the government on the COVID kind of bailout, or if you want to look at that kind of words. And so what this tax study today is telling us, Mike, is that when we had the last election, so when Boris went to the country, about 33% of the national income was the relation in tax. So 33% of the national income was the tax receipts. Now, they reckon that's going to go up to 37% by the next election, which is £100 billion extra. Now, Liz Truss came in last year talking of cutting tax. Conservative Party is normally a party that tries to lower taxes to give more money.
They all freaked out, didn't they?
They all freaked out. And remember what Margaret Thatcher once said, Mike? She said, there is no good thinking someone else will pay. That someone else is you. And all that money the government has spent, they are taking it back in tax. The government is absolutely ruining this country with how it's running the finances, Mike. If you want to get growth, you need to put money in people's pockets, not tax them to the hilt.
Yeah, and the only solution so far that this government seems to have is to subsidise things, you know, with our money, without asking us. So, I mean, the nonsense of paying people, you know, some kind of, you know, help to pay their gas bill or their electricity bill, £66 a month or whatever it was, billions of pounds going out. All that was doing was subsidising their oil companies. And then they said, oh, yeah, but don't worry, because we're going to put a windfall tax on them. It's still all our money that they're spending, that they could be spending on something else, or they couldn't, or maybe don't take it from us, or take VAT off, or take away the subsidies that we also have to pay on for green energy on the electricity bill. You know, stop taking our money and spending it.
Yeah, no, totally, Mike. And don't forget now, we had the £150 billion increase in 2022 last year on all the energy bills. Huge wealth transfer to the energy companies. Some of that paid for by the government. But what's the government coming out now, Mike? I think Sunak was saying last week, we're increasing the subsidy on heat pumps.
Yeah.
Well, who pays for that? Again,
exactly.
It comes out of the taxpayers' money. So this 100 billion more that they're having in taxes a year because of this kind of, a lot of this is fiscal drag as well, Mike. So what that term means is, what they do is, as your income, you know, your wages go up, they don't increase the tax level as much. So more and more people are dragged into higher rate of tax. No, 40, 50 years ago, a higher rate of tax was for the wealthy. Now it's pretty much most of Middle England.
Well, that's right, because if you say that the average pay in this country is around about 30,000, which I think is what it is, you know, you get a bit of a pay rise on top of that, you're suddenly edging pretty close to 40% tax, aren't you? And at the end of the day, you know, people don't really want to pay 40% tax unless they're getting something for it, and we're getting nothing for it.
The best people to decide what to spend their money on, Mike, are the people who earn the money themselves. So why the government insists on taking all this money, what I wouldn't be surprised, Mike, you know, this windfall that the IFS are highlighting is next year, an election, I'm sure Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak will start coming out with, oh, we're going to cut all these taxes because, you know, we've looked after the economy now. Inflation was going to fall anyway, Mike. They said they were going to promise to do that. But I think it could be a bribe to win the next general election. As I think one of your callers was just discussing just now, Mike. This probably would have been a whole lot worse under Labour. So what's going to happen in the future?
Well, exactly right. But, I mean, when you look at the bare figures of the actual tax take and what they are expecting to take, right, it's quite remarkable. Capital gains tax, which they took in 2020, 9.8 billion, that'll jump to 19.5 billion. So that's more than double the tax take on capital gains. Stamp duty is going to remain about the same. Inheritance tax is going to jump by about 50%. Income tax is going to jump up by about 33%. National insurance up by 40 billion quid. VAT and another increase. Corporation tax is going to go from 48 billion to 90 billion, so practically another 100% there. You know, what are they doing with all this money, for heaven's sake?
Oh, well, don't forget, Mike, we also have a 2.3 trillion debt. So one of the big problems you've got is 100 billion, that actual increase in the taxes that we will have because of that, you know, over the last 4 years, that extra 100 billion on what we probably would have if taxes had remained at the same level. The government is paying 100 billion pounds a year, roughly, in the debt interest, and they're borrowing nearly 100 billion pounds a year as well. So, you know, it sounds good as well. Oh, great, we're getting all of this tax in, but all of the last 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, Mike, governments have lived without their means. Now, you couldn't run your household, Mike. If you went to the bank and said, I know I've been borrowing off you for the last 30 years, can I have a bit more money? They'd laugh at you, Mike. And that's the problem with the government and the finances, because if governments work on very short termism, Mike, 5 years, so they got no interest in looking after the public finances, but if they try doing that, they'll get voted out, and they don't care about the next 10 to 20, 30 years after that.
Yeah, exactly right. Jamie, great to talk to you as ever.